You're watching and listening to WJHI 98.5 LP Jeffersonville and Channel 184 for a socially distanced production of Sports Talk. And today we have two very special guests. I have, to my left, UFC Hall of Famer Dan Severn and
you got it?
Jeffersonville head coach Danny Struck. And we're just going to talk all things wrestling, go into your career and all the awesome moments and achievements that you've gotten, and you came to Jeffersonville to talk with Struck's wrestling team. But I first want to ask you about your nickname, The Beast, and how did you actually get that nickname?
Well, the ring name or cage name, it depends on how you want to look at it right there. The Beast was given to me by a legendary NFL Hall of Famer, Jim Brown. So you may not know who he is, but I'm sure your father...
The Browns player. Right.
Yeah, Jim Brown. I mean, he was actually involved in a number of other movies, stuff like that, but he was involved with the Ultimate Fighting Championships for probably half a dozen of their shows because they wanted to have a tough individual as one of their play-by-play commentators, and no better person to utilize than like someone like a Jim Brown. When he first, in his words, he said, Dan, when I first met you, he said, I didn't think that much about you because you were the only guy that showed up to the press conference. Because most of your viewers, if they watch the Ultimate Fighting Championship product today, they have a weigh-in the day before, like on a Friday night, because there's weight classes in mixed martial arts. The predecessor, NHB, which stood for No Holds Barred, did not have weight classes. Biggest weight difference was just over 400 pounds. So think about that. If you stood in a cage and now you're going to go against a guy that's 400 pounds bigger than what you are. But I mean, it's changed a great deal. So Jim Brown said, he goes, you're the only guy that showed up to the press conference wearing a sports jacket and a tie, wearing your glasses. Literally everybody else thought that I was somebody's manager and that Al Snow, the professional wrestler Al Snow, was the actual athlete, because they were all the other athletes, they were wearing like muscle guard, tank tops, and they got piercings and they got tattoos and all looking tough and mean. And there's Dan Severn looking studious. And he said, but then to continue on, Jim Brown said, he goes, when you climbed up that cage, he said it was like watching Clark Kent morph into Superman. He says, I've never seen someone turn it on the way that you turned on. And he asked me how I was able to do that, and I was, kind of giddy that someone of his caliber would even ask me a question like that, because to me, you have to know when to turn things on and when to turn them off, because if you don't know how to turn it off, you could be in trouble with the law. So I was always a good competitor, just a very intense competitor.
So like you said, turning it on and turning it off, you were a guy that wrestled back in the era where there wasn't a lot of rules. It was very ruthless. Can you talk about the violence in your day when you was in the octagon?
Well, if you were to watch both products side by side, if you watched the current Ultimate Fighting Championships or the category of mixed martial arts, and then you saw the NHB No Holds Barred, you'd be more amazed by watching this, because the average match length of time back in was 2 minutes 22 seconds. A very violent 2 minutes and 22 seconds. So they're just worlds apart, because when you think about the company was also going through growing pains, because you had different politicians and legislators that were trying to shut it down. They looked upon the sport as, they didn't look at it as a sport. They looked at it as very barbaric. And it was they had to bring on people like Jeff Blatnick. Jeff Blatnick, he's gone now in terms of has deceased. But he was one of the people that was one of the advocates that actually helped work on the program. But he was also a 1984 gold medalist for wrestling. So he helped coin the phrase of mixed martial arts, because there are boxing, Muay Thai, karate, kung fu, but then there's grappling arts. You could be a wrestler, a judo practitioner, a jiu-jitsu practitioner. So this blended all elements of it. So just knowing, it looks a lot more barbaric, but most of the guys that are the champions, they have been part of a sport or have been doing some sort of a martial art discipline for 20 or more years of their life.
So I want to go back a little bit. You were talking about Jim Brown, the legendary football player. Now, you actually played football growing up, correct?
Loved, actually, all through high school, I loved football more than I did wrestling. I was a one-man wrecking machine.
So what made you pick wrestling over football?
Well, my senior year, my senior year, I had wrestling scholarships pouring in. I mean, in wrestling, when it came to wrestling, I was the #1 guy at my weight class. I even had a congressional nomination, so I could have gone to the Air Force Academy and things of that nature. And I had the academics. I mean, I was always basically a 3-1, 3-2. You know, it just wasn't that difficult for me for academics and the athletics. And I loved playing football more, and I had quite a few scholarships. But my senior year turned me off because we should have won a lot more things. We should have went undefeated. We should have been in playoffs and things of that nature. But because somebody else misses a block, somebody else misses a tackle, and then everybody loses. Well, the definition of wrestling is it's an individual sport. I mean, a team sport based upon individual performances. The team can lose, and I can still win. I like those stats because, I mean, even, Jess, I run businesses too. Nobody will outwork me. They might work a little bit smarter because they're a little bit better geared when it comes to a lot of this technology stuff like that, but at least I'm bringing more young people on board because I know I'm the dinosaur in these areas, and I need to bring those are my weaknesses, so I'm going to bring in people that have strengths in those areas to make me that much stronger. I've been self-employed ever since the 1992 Olympics. It was a terrible way that it came about, but when I look back, best thing in the world that ever happened for me, and I would not change a thing.
So it took a lot of hard work to get to where you were as a wrestler. Can you talk about the grind it takes to be a wrestler and to the grind that is on your body and the conditioning and everything in it?
Just to make sure I understand this, are we talking about amateur wrestling, or are we talking about professional wrestling, or are we?
Any
level. I'll talk about in the beginning my amateur wrestling career. It really wasn't until, and I did share this story with last night with Coach Struck's team, that it wasn't until my freshman year that the high school wrestling coach, I wrestled in junior high, 7th and 8th grade, and it wasn't until my 9th grade year, the wrestling coach, I went to turn in a paper, and on his desk there were a pile of these amateur wrestling news magazines. I had never seen this magazine before. And I'm like, Coach, I said, do you care if I look at a couple of these magazines? Coach, no, be my guest, but make sure they come back on my desk. So as I started thumbing through these, and I'm looking at, there's weightlifting programs for wrestlers, there's diet and nutrition programs for wrestlers, there's the psychological aspects, there's all kinds of cool techniques and tactics, and it talks about the psychological aspects, it talks about setting goals and things of that nature. So literally, as I'm thumbing through this, it dawned on me that up to that point in my life, I was just like every other wrestler. All I was doing is what the coach told me to do. But it's hard on the coach because the coach is working with 40, 50 or more athletes. He can only give you so much of the time. You've got to be honest with yourself and pull out like a piece of paper, pencil, and write things down. What are my weaknesses? If cardiovascular is one of my weaknesses, I better be spending more time running, both sprint intervals, but then some distance because matches are 6 minutes long. So you need a combination. If strength is my weakness, if I have a physics class, I better be working on more strength type of exercise, or if it's an after school program, you have to learn to do it on your time. And that's the hard part about a lot of young people, and I throw myself in that same category as when I was in high school. How many individuals are going to pay the price? Are you going to sacrifice time away from your friends, your family? And it's a very selfish world that we live in today, that it's all about me. And I want to crush. Candy Crush. But no, but it is. The thing that you'll either like or dislike about me there is the fact that I'm brutally blunt and to the point. I have no future in politics because I'm going to grab you by the scruff of the head and rub you into the cow pie of reality. It doesn't smell so good sometimes.
So you mentioned talking with Coach Struck's
Yeah.
wrestling team. Can you talk about that experience and what you've seen from this Jeff program?
Well, I mean, it's I was able to get to practice a little bit on the late side, but I was able to kind of just walk around the room there a little bit more. Again, all I really had a chance was to observe a small portion of time, and I believe it was only like day 3, I believe, or something like that, the practice. So it's way too early to throw any kind of estimates out there. I mean, it's the more serious athletes, they will have been doing some running and lifting on their own. It just all depends on what are their goals, what are their aspirations. The thing that I'm really big about, and I do a lot of speaking, like motivational, I foresee myself being that motivational speaker, doing a corporate gig and stuff like that, but a lot of it has to deal with athletics. And it is, are you willing to pay the price to do whatever it is? Be creative. And I run several businesses now, and I'm just a very, very creative person, and I've had to learn how to do Zoom meetings and all these kinds of Zoom phone calls and stuff that I'm somewhat of a knuckle dragger, barbaric caveman when it comes to a lot of the technology, but I'm learning it. I have to, or become extinct like the dinosaur.
So I'm going to throw in a question here. You guys were bringing up football, and before we got too far away from it, everybody knows my favorite topic is multi-sport athlete. Last night, he got to meet Coach Parker. Chaz has done some awesome interviews with our head football coach,
Okay.
Coach Parker. I'm bringing 2 football players to my mind that you didn't get to meet, Colin Corbin and Matt Munoz. Both should be looking at All-State and wrestling. Matt this year and Colin in a year or 2. Matt went back to football to push around big guys. Colin's always been a football player. But we got a whole other list of we had 29 football players missing from practice when he came in yesterday.
Wow.
So
what is your normal roster? How many?
should have had 82 on the roster this year, but COVID hit. A little different times.
No.
But right now, Coach Parker and I talk about no matter how much we push the multi-sport athlete, there's always that someone telling you to be sport specific. What could you say to my wrestlers that need to be playing football, or my football players that need to be wrestling, on what that specifically did for you before we go on to the next part?
I mean, in my career, I basically played 3 sports all 4 years. In the fall, I was a football player. Wintertime, I was a wrestler. And in the spring, track and field. And but also in the spring, I was doing summer wrestling, because there were a couple of different summer programs. The AAU and the USWF were the 2 organizations at that time. The AAU still exists, but it's a very small organization. Now you have USA Wrestling, but then they have My Way and a few other programs. But back then there's 2. I had a card for both of them, so I never stopped. I was doing something on a year-round basis. So playing football, like I said, in the fall, loved it. One-man wrecking machine on things, kamikaze, the whole 9 yards. And then there's the wrestling, great. Track and field. The track coach would always be mad if there was a Friday or Saturday meet, and he knew that I was there just for the conditioning, and conditioning is still, I enjoy being part of the team, but I was putting my investment and my time into my wrestling career, because that is what's going to take care of my athletic scholarship. That's how I'm going to go to college. I have 7 other brothers and sisters. I'm second on the totem pole. Asking mom or dad for money was never in the equation. Never even crossed my mind. How am I going to do this for myself? And I had a couple of my friends that were on the team. They had older siblings, and upon high school graduation, they went into the military for 4 years, came out of the military, then went to college on the GI Bill. So I thought, first option, that's what I'll be doing. But then by my sophomore year, a couple of college coaches started inquiring about me, because they thought that my older brother and I, they thought we were twins, because I actually was bigger than my brother, and they thought that we were twins. And then they found out that no, I was a year younger than what he was. They even got more excited, because they know that I was going to mature even more by the time I would graduate. So I like to tell young people is create options for yourself. Don't put your eggs in one basket, because we live in a very volatile society right now. And what I mean by volatility, I don't mean in violence. I mean, I'm talking about the volatility that the era of working for one company for 30 years and retiring with that gold watch is gone. The word pension, you will never hear. Your Coach Danny here probably heard of it. Maybe his father might have gotten a pension. Might have. I doubt it, because that word pension doesn't even exist hardly anymore. Way companies are downsized, stuff like that. It all boils down to you, the individual, of having the savvy to save and invest and things of that nature. So I'm going off into I'm digressing a few different areas right there, but I'm trying to hit a few different things because it makes a lot of your young people aren't going to understand, because we don't teach the right types of subjects in our schools. So that's a whole different program I could go on to. It's because we don't teach the right tools to really make you survive in school in the first place.
Now, when you were a UFC fighter, it wasn't as popular on the media aspect of it as it is now. It's really grown.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, you can feel. Oh, again, the biggest crowd I've ever been in front of was 55,000, a baseball stadium over in Tokyo, Japan. I kept thinking as I'm walking out to the ring, I went going, boy, I hope I don't trip and fall down. But no, it's incredible how it has grown over the years, and a lot of it, again, it was due to the marketing and the compromising rules that had to come in. Because like I said before, you had people like Senator John McCain was one of the biggest advocates that was trying to do away with the sport altogether, but at the same token, not for all the right reasons. Yeah, you always have to look at, and when someone has a reason or an agenda, don't ever take it at surface value. Better do a little digging underneath there to find out what might be some of the ulterior motives. So.
And you're good friends with Dana White, correct?
Dana White, yep. Yep.
Talk about his role in growing UFC.
Well, he's not a real popular person because he sort of speaks before he thinks. You know, he said stuff like, "There will never be women in mixed martial arts." I'm like, "Oh, Dana." I go, "You will be rolling those words right back on," because it's the same way like boxing. Well, you know, women's boxing was a little bit slower behind men's boxing. Women's MMA was going to come eventually. I mean, when Title IX came in the mid-'80s, now all women are allowed to have equal opportunities to participate in sports. They can be a football player if they want. They could be on a wrestling team if they want. You know, if there's not the female counterpart. You know, like basketball, there's usually a women's basketball team, so they have their options and things of that nature.
And then you moved on from UFC to WWF. Can you talk about that experience?
Well, a lot of people won't realize that my first profession, as of the 1992 Olympics, I was a professional wrestler first, but it was on the smaller independent scene where you would have saw me on the WWF, you know, a major network and stuff like that. I was on the independent scene at first. Then I started jumped in the Ultimate Fighting Championship because I had some people that were like going, that you ought to be ashamed of yourself that you used to do the real thing and now you jump into professional wrestling. I go, oh really? I go, then you really don't know your history then. I go, the reality is my first profession was professional wrestling. I go, and then I jumped into cage, and they're like, oh, but that's okay. I'm like, oh, a hypocrite. You know, it's okay one way, not okay the other way.
Well, so can you talk about some of the experiences in the WWF
I mean,
and all the kinds of people you've been with?
A bunch of wackadoo weirdos. Okay, I mean, again, but when I say that, I mean, I even said, I think the line I used there last night was, there are more ne'er-do-wells, misfits, nitwits, nincompoops, idiots that are in that industry than any other industry. I kind of bash it a little bit, but at the same token, I say that I have met some really wonderful individuals in that industry. The individuals, the other category weighs out the wonderful individuals, because there's a lot of people that even a company like like the Vince McMahon WWE, that there's a lot of independent professional wrestlers that will never be seen by him, because a lot of these guys on the independent scene, they'll never get that visibility. It's kind of a corrupt type of industry, how things are conducted there. So even though it's a show, I always say that you're an actor, you're an actress, but don't call it fake. There might be a script. They have these weekly shows that lead to the monthly pay-per-views, and they have to have 7, 8, or more of these storylines going, because if you went in the ring and you got hurt, and you were supposed to be in the upcoming pay-per-view, the show must go on. So we have these other 6 or 7 different storylines are going, so that show goes on. The pay-per-view is going to be coming up, but now we have to turn our focus away from you because you were going to be in the main event. We now have to turn our focus from you now to somebody else in the room. So it is very creative, and what I actually enjoyed most about that industry was when things did go wrong, because it's live. You got cameras on you. It's live. You're in front of 55,000 people possibly. How are you going to cover up your blunders or whatever at that point? That's when I love it the most, because rings are going to break. People are going to get hurt. How do you function from that point on? That's what I love the most about the magical world of professional wrestling.
So I have to ask, how do you think you would have been as a fighter in the current day version of the UFC and the different types of wrestling?
Chaz, I mean, with my background, with my pedigree that I have, the UFC never saw me at my best in the first place. And the blunt point, and I always say, here's just a list of facts. There's only 4 people in the world that have over 100 cage fights. I'm one of the 4. There's only 3 people in the world that have over 100 victories. I'm one of the 3. But the ironic part is, I faced the other 3. I defeated the other 3. And the closest one to my age is 15 years my junior. I'm in a category all by myself. They say, who's a GOAT? I'm the GOAT. I mean, look at the win-loss ratio. And again, sure dog, full contact fighter, these watchdogs of that industry, when did they even come about? 2, 3, 4 years or more after Ultimate Fighting Championship began. When I was in my very first UFC 4, it took them almost 45 minutes to get me out of the cage, because I did something that no one else had ever done. I mean, no match had gone beyond the 4-minute mark. We went, I think, 16 or 17 minutes. As the clock is ticking on down, in a lot of places in the United States, the pay-per-view just went black. The viewers did not get a chance to see who won this match, stuff like that. People are calling, I want my money back. Who won this match? So again, that's when they had to start. The company had to start implementing some other rules, because we can only buy so much pay-per-view time. We better know that we got some kind of judges and some rules, so that if a match goes this far, we have to be able to cut it off and say we declare you the winner and stuff like that. So the industry has gone through a lot of growing pains, just because, well, you had men that owned the company at the time that were not competitors. That's why I say that I'm the only competitor that has owned a company in no holds barred and mixed martial arts, and I know what's exactly going through the athlete's mindset. Same way as I know what the viewers want to see. So, if the right company would bring me aboard, or if the right individuals would be backing me, hint, hint, hint out there, I could take a company to the #1 spot.
I heard you use the word mindset. I want to tell Chaz, like, one of the things, when his first UFC, he was already 37 years old, right?
Yeah.
So, like, some of these guys, coming straight out of high school, straight out of college wrestling, 22 years old, their career is over at 37. He was starting it. So,
and I went
that's
20
what he
years
means
beyond
by
that.
his best time. And then when he got to WWE, he was already 48.
Yeah.
So, like,
I was Vince McMahon's oldest rookie ever at 48. He was shocked when he found out the time, and I know that if he would have known how old I was, he probably wouldn't have given me the time of day.
But he used the word mindset. My question was going to be, you've been state champ wrestler, world champion fighter, beat Olympic gold medalists, all-state football, world champion pro wrestler. What's the mindset day in and day out of a person like that?
Well, again, the thing is, we've had a chance, Coach Struck and I was able to, we shared a little bit of time in the weight room there. So I was going through just a little bit about what I do on, I'm a creature of habits, but then I want to get the maximum out of life. So there are certain things that I do almost on a daily basis, whether I'm traveling or not. I work out. I do things, because the reality is, each day I'm older. Each day I lose something. But at least if I keep moving and I keep doing, hopefully I slow the losing part down. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, as I was 10 years ago, as I was 20 years ago. So that's just simply just the reality of things. I know I'm not really answering your question. I mean, it was a mindset you were saying.
Yeah, like
okay.
being locked in a cage. What are you thinking right before?
No, again, that's where I'm trying to relax. Whether I'm stepping down a wrestling mat, a judo mat, or stepping inside of a cage, is being relaxed. And there comes a point in time, like in a cage, it's real simple. In a cage, when you got the legend himself, you got like a big John McCarthy, and he says, his magical words, "Let's get it on." As the two fighters start approaching, there's a point where as they approach, they'll stop, and they'll take their stance. And the moment he takes his stance, I no longer think. I simply react and do, because I am programmed. I programmed myself to where he takes his stance. As long as I know what his background is. If he's a striker, I know which direction I'm moving. If he's more of a grappler, it's just the opposite. And that's the wiring on that. I have yet to think entirely different. Striker versus grappler. I'm the first world-class wrestler ever to step inside of the octagon cage. But if you fast forward now to today, and you look at the top 10 men per weight class, 8 or 9 of them are wrestlers. You might have one jiu-jitsu guy, but you're not going to have a striker, because that striker has one chance to clip you before you clinch them. But once you clinch them or jam them up against cage wall or take them down, as I used to say, I look at my opponent and I'll go, "Welcome to my world. You shall never see the light of day again." Because, I mean, a striker can't strike you when you're clinched together like that.
So lastly, I want you to talk about, all the people out there, all the kids that are thinking about maybe pursuing a career in martial arts. What would be your message to them of how rewarding it is? You call yourself the GOAT, people that want to be on that platform.
I call myself the GOAT only because it's just facts. I'm just going to. It's not like I'm trying to be. Well, listen to me as I pat myself on the back. No. I just look at facts. And I go. When you look at my timetables, I started wrestling in 7th grade, 1969. I'm teaching by 1971. By 1971. By 72, I won my first national title. By 1976, I'm the #1 amateur wrestler at my weight class. By 1996, another 2 decades later, I'm the #1 cage fighter. Then, when you look at how many decades, I've competed in 6 different decades. I got people accusing me that no way is it possible that still Dan Severn. It's got to be Dan Severn Jr. and he grew a mustache, or I've got clones. But I've taken care of myself, and I have not taken on the damage, because a cage fighting career, you see most of these guys, they got big old cauliflower ears. Most professional wrestlers have big old cauliflower ears, or they got a broken nose, or they got big scar tissue all on there because they're getting cut. This is known as the big C area that's going to get cut and lacerated, and it just piles up with scar tissue to where it's like some of these guys have got to get surgery to reduce the scar tissue so they don't continue to cut and bleed. So as I always tell people, I've kept the money maker intact.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and thank you, Coach Struck, for coming on as well. This has been...
Well, let me just throw one thing. If other of your viewers are curious to find out a little bit more about what a Dan Severn does, simply go to my website at dansevern.com. I mean, I do a lot of different things because I've been an amateur wrestler, folk style wrestler, freestyle wrestler, Greco-Roman wrestler, but I've also been involved in judo, sambo, tough men contests. Then I jumped into professional wrestling. Then I jumped into cage fighting. And rest assured, I'm not finished yet. I still have a few more chapters to write.
Well, thank you once again for coming on. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. You've been watching and listening here at WJHI 98.5 LP Jeffersonville and Channel 184 for a special edition of Sports Talk.